Russia policy in the period of Cold War. For this question and for the next question, the scholar that will be there will be common. His name is Abhijit Ghosh. So Abhijit Ghosh basically says that during the period of Cold War, India and Russia had a commonality. During that period of Cold War, the commonality between India and Russia was that they had a unique relationship where the focus at that time was number one, to manage the situation of Cold War. And in order to manage the situation of Cold War, the idea was to prevent the world to fall into the hands of one global hegemonic power. So he says that during the Cold War period, even when the world was bipolar in nature, India Russia had a common element that binded them together. That common element was that they never wanted concentration of all power in the hands of only one specific country which is there. So they wanted to basically ensure that global hegemonic status is not only in the context of one country. Second important thing that he says is that apart from this uniqueness, there was a domestic consensus on strategic partnership. Domestic consensus on strategic partnership means that both the countries very clearly understood each other's sensitivities. One of the sensitivities of Russia at that time was that Russia basically wanted to ensure that with respect to the Soviet Union territories which are there is no promotion of democracy. We have already talked about inlet theory earlier. We have already seen that how through the period of Cold War, the objective of most of the countries at that time was to ensure, specifically with respect to Russia, was to ensure that the inlet of democratic ideas do not come into the context of what is called as Soviet Union, because Soviet Union wanted to preserve the global hegemony. Soviet Union was determined to ensure that America does not use democracy to dismantle Soviet Union. So if that was one of the sensitivities of Russia, we respected that. Despite the fact that India was a democracy, India never tried to use democracy as a tool to promote that. Second thing that is important here is that Russia also accepted India's very importantly sensitivity. And India's sensitivity at that time was the issue of Kashmir. We had very clearly stated that the issue of Kashmir is between India and Pakistan. It is not an international issue. So Abhijit Ghosh says that any attempt by any Western power with specific reference to US and UK who wanted to internationalize the Kashmir issue, Russia always used its veto power in the Security Council to prevent that to happen. So Russians were very clear about the sensitivity of India with respect to Kashmir. Sensitivity was we never wanted internationalization of the Kashmir issue. We said any attempt by any country to internationalize that issue should be rejected. US, UK tried doing that in the UN Security Council. Russia stood by us, ensured that our sensitivity is accepted, ensured that respecting our sensitivity, they vetoed any discussion on the Kashmir issue. So he says that strategic understanding between India and Russia was of deep level. Both understood each other's sensitivities. Third and most important point of the Cold War period is that throughout the Cold War period, Russia also understood the importance of not just regarding and respecting India's sensitivities, but also helping India to develop its defense and security. So defense and security thereby became one of the crucial dimensions under which one thing became very clear, that whenever India sought any defense-centric assistance from Russia, that defense-centric assistance from Russia was readily available. And what Abhijit Ghosh tries to say here is a very important point. He says that Russia never imposed any conditionalities. For example, he says that when we look at America, most of the American equipment which was available to India during Cold War came with conditionalities. One of the important conditionality was that India must align itself with the American bloc during the Cold War. Russia never said that. So Russia very clearly said that fine, if you wish to have a buyer-seller relationship, we are willing to explore that. And Russia explored that buyer-seller relationship. They always ensured that there is no pressure upon India to accept any conditionality. So these three factors became crucial drivers of India's Russia policy and Russia's India policy during the Cold War. How did they change now? Let us see the next question. Using the study of scholars, explain the core drivers in the post-Cold War period. What happened in the post-Cold War period is new dimensions came up. First important new dimension was that both India and Russia developed commonality at the global vision. When we say global vision, one thing is very important, that global vision here means that both Russia and India clearly stated that we favor a multipolar world. This is very important, Abhijit Ghosh says, because Russia at one time in the world was one of the most important bipolar players. Russia was in direct competition with US. And the fact that even at that time, when it was in direct competition with US, it never wanted the hegemony of the world to be with one power. Even at that time during Cold War, they had the thought of multipolarity. So what Abhijit Ghosh is trying to say is that even when the Cold War came to an end, at the end of the Cold War, India and Russia both understood one thing. We both need to stand for a multipolar world. And whenever India and Russia have spoken about multipolarity, their primary objective has been to ensure that there is no hegemony by US. In this manner, that USA tries to use its Western allies to dictate world affairs. So in the post-Cold War period, what binds India-Russia today is basically the principle of multipolarity. Second thing that he says is that today, what has changed in India and Russia in the post-Cold War period also is that there is number one change in the way the two parties look at each other at the defense level. He says that if during the Cold War India wanted to have a buyer-seller relationship with no conditionality, Russia accepted that. And if today in the post-Cold War period, India emphasizes that Russia must help us in co-production. Co-production means that Russia must help India develop defense capabilities by undertaking technology transfers to us, by training our people. Then today Russia has even accepted that. So this very clearly proves that when it comes to Russia, its willingness to change from merely being a buyer seller to now undertaking technology transfers, now underdoing co-production, is a proof that Russia as a country is not rigid, but it has also evolved with the globally changing situation. So merely saying that Russia remained a static power is wrong. In fact, this charge Abhijit Ghosh says applies to US. Because USA, right from the day one, since India became independent, has only insisted on what is called as a buyer-seller relationship. And when we tell America to do any kind of co-production or joint production, they will never involve India or any other country in joint production which is of high technology. हाई टेक्नोलॉजी मीन्स कि भाई कोई ढंग की चीज़ में नहीं लाएंगे हमें, रिडंडेंट सी कोई टेक्नोलॉजी होगी उसमें कहेंगे कि हाँ ये आगे सीख लो. रशिया ऐसे नहीं करता सर. So Russia, for that matter, has drastically changed its global view as per the changing international security environment. Third point that Abhijit Ghosh says in the post-Cold War period is that both the parties have explored some new areas of relationship. And most important area of relationship that they have today explored is an area called energy security. Because Russia today is one of the big suppliers in the world of oil and gas. And engaging with India, which is one of the big importers of oil and gas, is something that India and Russia have newly developed. Earlier, they never had this, but now they have. अच्छा, अब देखो जी अगला क्वेश्चन. What are the new areas or arenas of India's engagement with Russia? How these dimensions are different from the existing engagement of arms and geopolitics and economic engagement? Explain using these scholars. Sir, one important scholar here is Nadan Krishnaman. Nadan, Nadan, Krishnaman. Krishna Man, Krishnaman. Now, what does he say? He says that today, apart from what is called as generally arms, geopolitics, economics, which have always dominated India, Russia since the end of Cold War, these two countries have now developed certain new arenas of cooperation. First arena is what is called as a 2+1 format. Now he says, Nadan Krishnaman says that under this what is called as 2+1 format, we have to understand that what has India and Russia understood here is that they will collectively cooperate with each other to stabilize a third country. He says, ki, sir, this is where India, Russia differ from the global 2+1 practice. But globally, whenever we talk about 2+1 model, please remember one thing that globally 2+1 model basically means that two countries will come together to develop a third country. Like when we talk about India, Japan, अभी जापान करेंगे हम थोड़ी देर में आगे जाके 2-4 दिनों में, तो आप देखोगे कि जापान में हम कहते हैं 2+1 कि जापान इंडिया एंड +1 इज अफ्रीका कि भाई जापान एंड इंडिया विल गो देयर कलेक्टिवली एक्सप्लोर देयर good relationship with each other to develop Africa. But he says that with respect to Russia, the 2+1 here is different. If globally 2+1 is a template of development, then for Russia, India, the 2+1 is a template for stabilization and security. He says the best example of this is Afghanistan. Afghanistan is an area which is of crucial interest to Russia as well as crucial interest to India. Today, there is a deep trust between Russia and India to collectively ensure that there is regional security and stability in Afghanistan. Neither of the parties want any instability or crisis in Afghanistan. So this is one area which has emerged as a new area of cooperation, where 2+1 model is used for stability security. Number two, there is a global level convergence between India and Russia on issue of terrorism. Russia has historically always condemned terrorism, specifically terrorism which has been sponsored by Pakistan against India. But there is a growing importance and understanding in Russia that merely condemning Pakistan will not change the behavior. So what Russia has started doing is it has started collaborating with India to help isolate Pakistan internationally. So for example, this person here, Nadan Krishnaman, says that today Russia helps India with respect to isolating Pakistan when it comes to UN Security Council Resolution 1737. 1737, UN Security Council Resolution 1737. So this resolution number 1737 of the Security Council is a resolution against terrorist groups, which is a global instrument to basically isolate terrorist groups. So Russia and India have started collaborating here at the level of isolating Pakistani terrorist groups. Third point here is that with respect to what is known as outer space, this has emerged as a new area of cooperation which never existed between India and Russia. Both countries today, India, Russia, have started globally asserting. Asserting means globally emphasizing that there is complete requirement of everybody to ensure that we do not nuclearize the outer space. Because beta, there is a problem that some countries like America, Britain, have been now started talking about nuclearizing the outer space. They have already nuclearized the outer space during Cold War. But now India, Russia have started asserting that number one, there will be no nuclearization because outer space is a part of global commons. We will talk about global commons in the subsequent parts also more effectively and in more detail. But in a very simple language, global commons means something like a global public good. So that means कि भाई outer space is available for all. And if outer space is available for all, idea is that number one, it should not be nuclearized. And not only here they cooperate at the outer space level of another important thing, that is to prevent colonization of outer space. So India, Russia have also started saying that there should be no attempt by any country to colonize outer space. अब वो देखो अमेरिका में एक वो पागल आदमी है वो जिसका नाम है इलोन मस्क, वो हरकतें करता रहेगा वो, हम रॉकेट उड़ाएंगे, हम आउटर स्पेस में कॉलोनी बनाएंगे, हम जाकर वहां पर जो है उत्तम नगर बसा लेंगे। तो यार पहले धरती की प्रॉब्लम्स को तो सॉल्व कर ले तू यार। शकल से भी उतना ही घिनौना लिखता है जितना तू अकल से है। और ऐसे प्रेसिडेंट का सपोर्ट कर रहा है जो वैसी मानसिक तौर से बीमार है, ट्रम्प। तो एक चीज तो तय है, देखो जो मर्जी हो, इंडिया एंड रशिया हैव कलेक्टिवली स्टार्टेड सेइंग कि देखो आउटर स्पेस कैपेबिलिटी सर सबके पास है। अपने यहाँ पर भी रॉकेट जो है ना 1960 से उड़ रहे हैं, और हमारे रॉकेट जो है ना गुलेल की तरह बेटा छर्रा मारते हैं तो पहुंच भी जाता है, ऐसा नहीं कि पहुंचता नहीं है अपना। तो हमारा स्पेस प्रोग्राम सक्सेसफुल इसलिए है क्योंकि थैंकफुली वो स्पेस टेक्नोलॉजी की जो साइंस है ना सर, वो हमारे नेताओं को समझ नहीं आती। इस रीजन से सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि इंटरफेरेंस नहीं होता। अब आप सोचो मोदी को बोलो कि भाई स्पेस है, स्पेस में रॉकेट है, जो व्यक्ति ये कह रहा है कि बादल के पीछे जहाज छुपा दो, उसको स्पेस क्या मतलब, क्या अकल आएगी, उसको समझ आएगी, सोचो। तो थैंकफुली क्योंकि ये अनपढ़ गंवार होते हैं ना, इस कारण से एक फायदा ये हो जाता है देश में कि स्पेस में कोई इंटरफेरेंस नहीं होता। और थैंकफुली स्पेस एक ऐसी चीज है जो चल पाई है अभी तक। वो अलग बात है कि मतलब मार्स पे अगर या कहीं चांद वांद पे हमने कोई रॉकेट वॉकेट पहुंचा दिया तो फिर मोदी जी क्रेडिट लेने पहुंच जाते हैं। बट चलो, फैक्ट ये है कि सर इंडिया रशिया ने बोल दिया कोई कॉलोनी वलोनी नहीं बसनी साहब ऊपर जाके, हाँ उत्तम नगर बसाना है तो जमीन पे बसाओ यहाँ पे आके, ऊपर नहीं बसेगा। तीसरी चीज सर, इन्वायरमेंट। Sir, completely new area of cooperation is environment. One reason why environment is because sir, Russia has a lot of area which is under permafrost, permanently frozen area. So because Russia has a lot of area which is under permafrost, today it also contains answers to certain problems of climate change which nobody can know. Because in permafrost layers of earth are hidden certain aspects of our environment and certain behavior of species that we have never explored. And Russia is all the more willing with India today to explore that. So therefore one thing is very clear, sir, that again it is in this juncture that there is an attempt by both the parties to ensure that they are able to identify cooperation at the environmental level. And last but not the least, the next area is basically plurilateralism. Plurilateral here means certain groupings where India, Russia come together for third countries. For third countries. For example, sir, with respect to Afghanistan, as we just said, 2+1. But here, please understand, beta, where India, Russia come together for Afghanistan under plurilateralism is not merely India, Afghanistan. It is to support a process in Afghanistan called Heart of Asia process. But a Heart of Asia is basically a institutional mechanism. HOA, Heart of Asia. That Heart of Asia is an institutional mechanism where Asian countries have collectively come together to ensure peace and stability of Afghanistan. Russia today is one of the active participants along with India in Heart of Asia. Similarly, for that matter, when we talk of plurilateral groups, there are two other issues which are there very clearly visible. One is the SCO and the second one is BRICS. So SCO and BRICS again provide those plurilateral platforms for India, Russia, which they have started exploring since the end of the Cold War as new dimensions where common platform based groupings are available to engage. आप समझ रहे हो इस चीज को? सो प्लीज रिमेंबर बच्चे कि रशिया एंड इंडिया रिलेशनशिप शुड नॉट बी ओनली सीन थ्रू द प्रिज्म ऑफ डिफेंस और ऑयल, because there are multiple layers beyond defense and oil. Because when we look at India Russia, na sir, general perception is India Russia during Cold War is equal to defense, India Russia during post Cold War is equal to oil. That's where it is over. But here we have seen multiple other domains. Now comes the next question ki bhai, what are some of the challenges that confront India's engagement with Russia? Are these challenges pure misconceptions between the two, or are they based on facts that have potential of creating strategic divergences? Very crucial question. Here, basically, the scholar is Girijesh Pant. Girijesh Pant. Now, let's understand. Girijesh Pant says that when we look at India and Russia, one thing is very important. Over a period of time, India and Russia have received a lot of challenges. These challenges between India and Russia are challenges which are, number one, not because of any factual disagreement between the two. These challenges have emerged purely because of misconceptions between the two. So he says कि let's settle the question number one, कि there are no divergences because of some factual differences. Factual differences here basically mean beta कि there are no problems between India and Russia which are structural. Whatever challenges have come up are because both the countries have some different perception over an issue. How? Now he gives certain examples. Number one, Pakistan. He says that what has happened over a period of time is that Pakistanis are one of the players that have started cooperating with Russia at the defense level. Russia has been doing certain military exercises with Pakistan. Through these military exercises, Russia is trying to showcase certain defense products to Pakistan. And sometimes Pakistan also is keenly exploring purchase of certain Russian equipments which are there. Now, this creates a difference of perception in India. Because in India, there is a belief that why should Russia end up in going to supply weapons to somebody like Pakistan, who is an enemy of India? So here, Girijesh Pant says, see, this is not a difference that has happened because of any misunderstanding between India and Russia. This is because there are some perceptual issues. He says that over a period of time since the end of the Cold War, because India is diversifying its defense basket, and because of that defense diversification, what has happened is that India has started purchasing defense products from US today, Israel today, Germany today. As a result of which, what has happened is that the number of weapons that we buy from Russia have gone down significantly. So Russia's defense trade with India has reduced, not to a big extent, but to a small extent. So Russia today wants to sell its products outside because for Russia, one of the biggest contributors to its own GDP is none other but its defense exports. So in this sense, Russia is seeing Pakistan as a prospective defense market. And Russia knows very clearly the sensitivities between India and Pakistan. And Russia has always communicated to India that even if we end up in giving a defense product to Pakistan, we will ensure that it is such a product that cannot be misused against India or does not give Pakistan the leverage that it will give them an edge over India. आप समझ रहे हो? भाई बंदूक का कवर दे दिया, या मान लो जो है टैंक के ऊपर डालने के लिए तरपाल दे दी। अब इससे पाकिस्तान क्या कर लेगा? या मान लो जी टैंक के अंदर लगी हुई चेन जो है उसकी गरारियां निकल गई, वो नहीं दे दी 2-3 लाख के। तो सर ये चीजों से इंडिया को घबराना नहीं है। इसीलिए इंडिया के अंदर क्या होता है ना कि सर, अगर कभी हम पाकिस्तान और रशिया के बीच कोई कोऑपरेशन देखते हैं ना, तो मीडिया में सेंसेशनलाइज हो जाता है ये। मीडिया का तो काम ही है ये सेंसेशनलाइज कर देना। चैन से सोना है तो जाग जाओ, क्योंकि पाकिस्तान के पास आ चुका है रशिया का माल। अरे कुछ नहीं होगा सर उसके पास, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है। तो मीडिया सेंसेशनलिज्म से पॉलिसी नहीं चलती सर। इंडिया को और पाकिस्तान को और रशिया को, तीनों को ये बात पता है। तो ये एक परसेप्चुअल इशू है। सेकंड ही टॉक्स अबाउट इज चाइना। He says that today Russia and China have developed a very deep relationship, and that is a fact. China India do not have a very comfortable relationship. That is also a fact. And today there is a point where in India we believe that tomorrow, if there is a war that India may have with China, will Russia come and stand by us? Will Russia come and support us? So this question, Girijesh Pant says, is a wrong question. Because this question, when you ask कि tomorrow if there is a war between India China, will Russia come and stand by us? He says that why this question itself is faulty is because here you are accepting the fact that India number one is not capable to fight a war. So if today you are saying that will Russia come, you may one day also say कि what if Russia does not come, then will US come? Sir, the question is not who will come. The question is that does India today have the capability to fight a standalone war with China if it happens? So he says that these mere speculation based questions which are there, कि भाई कल को चाइना के साथ लड़ाई हो गई तो क्या रशिया आएगा? भाई रशिया क्यों आएगा? उसको क्या जरूरत है आने की? आपके अंदर इतने दम नहीं है कि आप जाके चाइना से लड़ लो? आपको ये चीज समझनी है ना सर। आपको यहाँ पर ये समझना है कि ये स्पेकुलेशन बेस्ड क्वेश्चन है। ये कोई रिलेशनशिप के बीच में डाइवर्जेंस पैदा करने वाले नहीं है। मतलब आप ये कह रहे हो कि चलो रशिया आएगा या नहीं, कल को अगर मान लो पाकिस्तान के साथ लड़ाई होगी तो आप ये कहोगे कि सर विल यूएस कम एंड हेल्प अस? मतलब इससे ज्यादा नीच चीज क्या होगी इंडिया के लिए कि मतलब पाकिस्तान से लड़ाई हो रही है और हम अमेरिका से मदद मांग रहे हैं? हम सोचो ना। मतलब पाकिस्तान के साथ तो ये परिस्थिति होनी चाहिए कि हम अपने 3-4 गुजराती छोड़ दें तो वही उनको मारा है। मैं जानबूझ के गुजराती इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ क्योंकि वैसे ही वो लड़ने लड़ने की हैसियत 2 दिन ही उनकी, एक आध थप्पड़ उप्पड़ खाया वैसे ही गिर गए वो। भाई वो कोई मार्शल रेस टाइप के लोग थोड़ी हैं वो, हर चीज में चीनी डाल के खाने वाले। तो आप इस चीज को समझो सर। तो ये गिरिजेश पंत कहता है कि सर इस प्रकार के स्पेकुलेटिव क्वेश्चन से कोई डाइवर्जेंस पैदा नहीं हो रहा। सो लेट्स नॉट कंपेयर द अनकंपेरेबल्स। इंडिया चाइना, इंडिया रशिया, रशिया चाइना ट्राइंगल इज नॉट कंपेरेबल ट्राइंगल हियर। सो लेट्स नॉट इंडल्ज इन दिस स्पेकुलेटिव थिंकिंग। He says while media may love to speculate, but the strategic community of India knows very clearly we don't need to do that. Number three here is, sir, very importantly, the challenge of language barrier. He says that today India, Russia have started exploring relationship in multiple areas. Today there is a relationship happening at the level of environment also, at the level of prevention of nuclearization of outer space also, etc. And we are buying oil also from them. He says that despite all this, the bigger issue today is that with respect to Russia, there is a language barrier. Russian language is something that prevents India, Russia to cooperate deeply. Russians also do not know इंडियन लैंग्वेजेस विच आर देयर। देखो रशिया में तो एक लैंग्वेज है रशियन सर, हमारे यहाँ पर तो 1 करोड़ लैंग्वेज है। हर लैंग्वेज का अलग डायलेक्ट भी है। एक ही शब्द को जो पंजाब में बोला जाए उसको यूपी में अलग नजरिए से बोला जाएगा। तो बात यह है कि सर रशियंस को हमारी लैंग्वेज भी नहीं आती, हमारे डायलेक्ट भी नहीं आते। हम सोचो गलती से कोई हरियाणा का डिप्लोमेट चला जाए रशिया। उसके बात करने का तरीका बेचारे का चाहे नेचुरल होगा, रशिया को लगेगा ये बात ही गुस्से में कर रहा है। अरे भाई वो बात ऐसे ही करते हैं। आपको ये चीज समझ नहीं है। और लैंग्वेज बैरियर बहुत बड़ा सर। क्योंकि लैंग्वेज बैरियर में ये है कि सर हमने कभी रशियन लैंग्वेज को प्रायोरिटाइज नहीं किया, डिस्पाइट कि इतना डीप रिलेशनशिप था। तो ये एक चैलेंज है जो अगेन हिंडर कर रहा है कोऑपरेशन को। चौथा पॉइंट वो कहता है इसके बाद है सर, इनएडिक्वेट नॉलेज अबाउट द बिजनेस पोटेंशियल ऑफ ईच अदर। इनएडिक्वेट नॉलेज अबाउट द बिजनेस पोटेंशियल ऑफ ईच अदर। इसका मतलब ये है सर कि इंडिया और रशिया के बीच में जो सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है वो ये है कि भाई there is a tremendous scope to do business with Russia. There is a tremendous scope of Russians to do business with India. But ironically, neither of the parties have knowledge on how to explore that business potential. Why? Because number one, there are no institutions that have done researches. So he blames the academia. He says that the academics is to be blamed because the academics of both India and Russia have never explored the kind of relationship that either of the parties can undertake at the business level. So even while we may want to promote business, lack of knowledge about the businesses itself is a big hurdle. ठीक है जी। अब आते हैं जी अगले पे कि भाई व्हाट आर दी एरिनाज वेयर इंडिया रशिया आर ओपनिंग न्यू चैप्टर्स ऑफ कोऑपरेशन एनालाइज विद रेफरेंस टू पीएम्स रीसेंट विजिट टू रशिया। तो अभी ये जुलाई में गया था अपना लड़का, आपको पता है। तो अब यहाँ पर हमने क्या क्या एक्सप्लोर किया है सर। फर्स्ट थिंग वी हैव एक्सप्लोर्ड एज अ न्यू एरिया इज सर स्टेक इन एनर्जी। Stake means कि भाई we have started telling Russia that we are not going to only buy oil from you. We are also going to come to Russia to explore oil with you. So we want to not only remain a buyer seller for oil, we want to be now one of the explorers of oil in Russian territory. For example, sir, in Russia there are oil blocks in a place called Sakhalin, 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 Eastern Russia में। So, sir, Sakhalin is one place where today India's ONGC Videsh Limited, OVL, has started undertaking joint exploration of oil blocks with Russia. So, you see, one important point here is beta ki when we undertake joint exploration with Russia, we learn about exploration expertise from Russia also. And doing it in a foreign territory can be beneficial for us in the future because the same knowledge that we will generate and gather with joint exploration with Russia can be used in, let's say, Africa. भाई अफ्रीका में भी तो इतना तेल है। अफ्रीका में इतना तेल है, उनको पता ही नहीं था कि तेल है। पानी समझ के नहा रहे थे उससे, बाद में पता चला तेल है। तो आप ये चीज़ को समझो, जो नॉलेज वहां से गेन होगी वो अफ्रीका में भी लगेगी। अच्छा, इसके बाद today we have also started undertaking sir developmental projects in Siberia. By undertaking developmental projects in Siberia, we have tried to give a message to China by being in Russia, by being in Russia's Siberia, which is geographically closer to China, to tell China that see, we can also do development in a territory in your neighborhood, like you try to do in our neighborhood of, let's say, Nepal or let's say Bangladesh. So if you China today comes to Nepal and Bangladesh to do development, and then say कि see these are developmental templates for other countries to follow, that they must engage with us, we can also do the same in your backyard of Siberia. जबकि साइबेरिया में तो आइडियली चाइना को जाके खुद पहले डेवलप करना चाहिए था, जबकि चाइना रशिया के रिलेशंस तो और भी ज़्यादा अच्छे हैं। पर चाइना का वो वेकेंट स्पेस इज समथिंग दैट वी हैव ट्राइड टू कैप्चर। नाउ द थर्ड इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट हियर इज सर मेक इन इंडिया। बेटा रीसेंट पीएम विजिट जहां पर अभी क्वेश्चन में आ जाए मेक इन इंडिया गिरा दो, जैसे कौवे की बीट है, ये गिराना ही गिराना, एग्जामिनर इसी से खुश होगा। सो रशिया हैज ऑल्सो वेरी ओपन हार्टेडली embraced मेक इन इंडिया. It has very clearly stated that Make in India is something where we will cooperate. They are exploring various dimensions. Fourth is very importantly, sir, INSTC, ये बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है बेटा, इंटरनेशनल नॉर्थ साउथ ट्रांजिट कॉरिडोर, INSTC. So INSTC is one area where India, Russia are today building a transportation corridor that goes from Russia, Eurasia, Iran, Afghanistan, and this area, Iran, Afghanistan, Eurasia to Russia, if it is built as a corridor, it will allow India not only to access Eurasia, it will also allow India to access what is called as Europe. And it will also create a corridor for Russia to basically sell products to India and other Asian countries. That is why you have to remember one thing, beta, here, that it is often stated that International North-South Transit Corridor, INSTC, could be India's way of engaging with Russia to balance of BRI. So the more focus we put on INSTC, higher chances are that we create an alternative to the BRI. सो ये PM विजिट लेवल पर प्रायोरिटाइज होना मीन्स कि भाई इसको एक स्पेशल इंपॉर्टेंस दी गई है. अब आते हैं अगले क्वेश्चन पे कि सर हाउ इज द इमर्जिंग जियोपॉलिटिकल मैट्रिक्स बिटवीन चाइना रशिया लाइकली टू इम्पैक्ट इंडिया. एग्जामिन थ्रू स्कॉलर. स्कॉलर हियर इज सर श्याम सरन. श्याम सरन से इज कि सर रशिया चाइना एंगेजमेंट टुडे is likely to impact India because we have to understand the nature of engagement today. He says that China, Russia are engaging today, number one, to create an alternative to US dollar. And if they are trying to work on creating an alternative to US dollar, means that they are driving what is called as de-dollarization. And if they are going to drive de-dollarization, with India having deep relations at the economic level with China, with India having deep political and strategic relations with Russia, any attempt by Russia, China to do de-dollarization will have implications for India. Because India today has a very deep relation with US. So in the future, Sham Saran says that India will witness a problem of clearing and creating a path. Creating a path where it may have to choose that whether it supports the China-Russia de-dollarization or whether it supports US dollar and stands with US. एंड इन दिस कॉन्टेक्स्ट बेटा अभी आप रिसेंट ट्रम्प का वो थ्रेट देखो पिछले हफ्ते तो जो उसने दिया है. एक तो इतनी मधुर लैंग्वेज का प्रयोग करता है वो. उसने ये जब बात बोली कि भाई ब्रिक्स कंट्रीज अगर डॉलर का ऑल्टरनेटिव ढूंढेंगी तो 100% टैरिफ लगेगी. सर ये उसकी तरफ से धमकाने वाली बात है. अच्छा सोचो कितनी आयरोनिकल बात है कि ट्रम्प ने ये स्टेटमेंट दिया, ब्रिक्स के किसी कंट्री की तरफ से कोई टिप्पणी नहीं आई, हमारा फॉरेन मिनिस्टर खड़े होकर बोलने लग गए नहीं नहीं हम तो कभी चाहते ही नहीं थे, हम तो कभी चाहते. कौन पूछा तेरे से? उसने क्या तुम्हें बोला कि भाई तुम स्टेटमेंट दो? क्यों चबड़ चबड़ करनी? चुप होके बैठ जा. लेकिन नहीं, बोल दिए उठा के चापलूसी करने के लिए. अब सर प्रॉब्लम ये है कि सर वन थिंग इज वेरी क्लियर बेटा कि रशिया चाइना विल डेफिनेटली फाइंड अ सब्स्टिट्यूट टू US डॉलर. Sham Saran says India will find it difficult to accept that new currency. Whether that new currency is Russian ruble or whether that new currency for that matter is yuan, we do not know. But whatever that currency Russia, China will collectively create as a substitute to dollar, the bigger question mark on India will be what will India embrace? If India continues to say, I will use US dollar to trade with Russia, they cannot do so because Russians are under sanction today. And if India says that, okay, I will not use, let's say, US dollar, but I will do trade with Russia in yuan, because Russia, China have agreed that they will use yuan, then again India will have a problem. Because how will India justify to US? Ki bhai, why you are using yuan and not the US dollar? So Sham Saran says ki sir, India is in a trap. And this trap is not easy to escape. Second point he says is that next place where Russia, China are collaborating are sir areas of high technology. They are both collectively exploring certain technologies which are of surveillance level. Shamsaran says कि भाई Russia, China both have an interest in ensuring development of surveillance technologies which can be used by both the states to keep an eye upon their own populations. It is in this context, Shamsaran says that India has basically found its own path because Russia-China cooperation in high technology will not impact India. Why? Because number one, India in this scenario is not keen on any kind of engagement with Russia, China on such technologies which are of surveillance nature. Because India is very clear on the fact that high technology should be put to grassroots use, mass use. Because any type of high technology, if we want to use, must benefit the masses of our country. So he says that Russia China collaboration in high technology for mass surveillance is not going to impact India. Third place is what he says is the BRI. He says that Chinese attempt today to create the BRI is creating problem for Russia. Because Russia has understood one thing, that any attempt by China to create and promote BRI is likely to put Russia on the secondary status to that of China. Because China will say BRI is mine. Any country who accepts BRI indirectly accepts the supremacy of China. So today he says that this is going to have an impact on India-Russia engagement. Shamsaran says that Russia has not said anything negative about BRI. It has allowed China to use BRI to internationalize China. But what China is doing is countered by Russia, because Russia today is engaging silently with India to build the alternate to BRI that we have just talked about, called the INSTC. So Russia is cooperating with India to develop the international north-south transit corridor. So this is again an area where there is no trap for India or Russia. So he says that out of these three situations, the only challenging place where there will be a direct impact will be the de-dollarization thesis. How India responds to the de-dollarization is something India will find it difficult to resolve. In other areas, he says the impact is not likely to generate any divergence between India and Russia. तो ये क्वेश्चन समझ आ गया जी आपको? ये हो गया जी. अब जो ये नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है सर, Indian Prime Minister has stated that this is not the era of war, calling on President Putin to cease hostilities in Ukraine, a clear signal that India does not support Russia's action in Ukraine. The position could be a thorn in Indo-US relation, although it does not make sense to people to place this issue at the center of the bilateral ties, given the Indian clearly does not support the war and does not have the means to end it. There are many other issues of mutual interest and of greater concern that India and the US should pursue, examine using scholarship. तो सर ये जो इंडिया का पोजीशन है यूक्रेन को लेके कि भाई दिस इज नॉट एन एरा ऑफ वॉर, ये क्वेश्चन बेटा मैं आपके लिए होमवर्क दे रहा हूँ आपको. अभी लास्ट वीक मैंने यूट्यूब पे एक वीडियो भी बनाया था इसको लेके. आप टेलीग्राम पे जाओगे तो आपको इंडियाज़ यूक्रेनियन पॉलिसी जो है, मेरे ये टेलीग्राम चैनल पे वो वीडियो वहाँ पर मिल भी जाएगा, उसको एक बार देख लीजिएगा. 5-6 मिनट का बच्चे वीडियो है, छोटा सा. उसमें इंडिया की पॉलिसी यूक्रेन को लेके क्या है, वो रशिया को इम्पैक्ट कैसे करेगी और यूएस को कैसे टैकल करेगी, तीनों पॉइंट कवर्ड है उसमें. और ये जो तीनों के तीनों पॉइंट मैंने उसमें बताए, ये तीनों के तीनों पॉइंट बेटा मैंने पढ़े थे एक स्कॉलर की रिसर्च के, जिसका नाम आप लिख सकते हो यहाँ पे. उसका नाम है अतुल अनेजा. अतुल अनेजा. तो उनका पूरा का पूरा रिसर्च पेपर था. उस रिसर्च पेपर को पढ़ के मैंने वो पॉइंट्स बनाए थे, बट उसको क्योंकि मैंने जीएस के पर्सपेक्टिव से एक्सप्लेन किया था, अतुल अनेजा का नाम नहीं लिया था. तो आप अतुल अनेजा का पॉइंट यूज करके, उनका नाम यूज करके इन पॉइंट्स को आप वहां से नोट डाउन कर सकते हो. ठीक है जी. ये एक होमवर्क करके रखिएगा सर. यदि किसी प्रकार का कोई डाउट होगा तो डिस्कस करेंगे उसको, फिर आगे बढ़ें जी. रशिया क्लियर हो गया जी, यहाँ तक किसी को कोई डाउट? चलो, अब आते हैं जी अगले क्वेश्चन पे, दैट इज द ईयू वाला पार्ट जो है। अब हम ईयू पे अगर आए तो यहाँ पर देखो जी, सबसे पहले क्वेश्चन उठता है, एक्सप्लेन द ओरिजिन ऑफ इंडियाज रिलेशनशिप विद द ईयू थ्रू द यूज ऑफ स्कॉलर सर। तो स्कॉलर हियर इज सलमा बावा, सलमा SALMA, बावा BAVA. Salma Baba has explained that India's relationship with EU has evolved since the time of Cold War. Salma Baba further says that it was in 1963 when Europe established the European Economic Community that India's engagement since 1963 with European Economic Community has been seen. That is the first thing. Second thing is that it was in 1973 that both the parties, India and Europe, at that time broadly explored an important cooperation agreement at the commercial level. So in 1973, Europe decided to commercially engage with India diplomatically, started engaging at the diplomatic level to promote trade and commerce. But it was only in 1994, finally, at the end of the Cold War, and finally after the creation of European Union, that in 1994, the India and Europe signed what is called as a cooperation agreement. And this cooperation agreement was called India EU Cooperation Agreement, under which they decided to have number one, political contacts at the highest level. So it was decided that politically we will support what is called as Europe. Europe will politically support India. And the political support here basically meant that both the parties will now have frequent high level political visits. But after this, the most important document that was signed was in the year 2000. And it is in the year 2000 that India EU agreed to have what is called as global cooperation of trade and commerce. Because by the year 2000, India's economy was liberalized to the extent that India could now globally cooperate with EU for global level commerce. Global level commerce means that if there is a commodity being manufactured in one country but coming from that country to Europe, then Europe can sell that commodity to India. So, thereby integrating India to the global economic commerce level. Then, more important point is that it is in the year 2004, a strategic partnership agreement was finally established. And since the strategic partnership agreement, Salma Baba says that India Europe have established what is called as a cobweb model. Cobweb model. Cobweb model here means that Salma Baba says that today India's relationship with EU is not purely and only centered around what is called as political and commerce. It also includes cooperation in the levels of culture and technology. It also includes cooperation apart from culture and technology, even in academics, student exchange and skill development. Academic student exchange skill development. So one thing is very clear that today there is a cobweb. Cobweb means that there are multiple domains of engagement. Getting the point? Now comes the next question ki improving economic relations have been accompanied by growing consensus on security issues. And both India and EU share a mutual commitment to democracy, human rights, pluralistic society, and peaceful conflict resolution. Discuss with scholars. So here the scholar, very important, is a person by the name of Feng Zhongping. Feng, Feng, Zhongping, Zhongping, Zhongping. So Feng Zhongping says that today when we look at India and EU at the level of democracy, one thing is very clear that EU has a very positive perception of India as a democracy. But the problem is कि sir, EU often makes certain comments about lack of deep democracy in India. Feng Xiaoping says कि भाई देखो, number one, EU appreciates that India is a big democracy. But then the problem arises because EU tends to make certain comments about a lack of deep democracy in India. For example, EU has been recently saying that not allowing the opposition space in the politics or putting unnecessary curbs on oppositional politics in India is not good for Indian democracy. So sometimes we have seen, sir, countries like Germany, countries like Poland, these kind of countries, we have seen that they have often made certain statements with respect to our democracy, which we believe are not conducive from their side. But the problem is that when it comes to democracy, Feng Xiaoping says that for EU, democracy means equal space to the opposition also. But here, Feng Xiaoping says a very important point. He says that today there is a global level rise of the rightists. And even EU is witnessing the rise of rightists. So, as a result of which, the rightists generally have the tendency of not allowing spaces at the political level for opposition. While Germany may not be a victim of this rightist policy today, France is witnessing that problem. Poland is witnessing that problem. Britain is a witness of that problem. So, global rightists per se have this general tendency of not giving space to the opposition politics which are there. Because today, global rightists are more attuned with authoritarian tendencies. अब देखो ना, ग्लोबल लेवल पर यही चीज चल रही है. तो स्पेस फॉर ऑपोजिशन जनरली कम होगा. तो ये एक एरिया है जो कॉज ऑफ कंसर्न बन चुका है. दूसरा वो कहता है कि सर, विद रिस्पेक्ट टू ह्यूमन राइट्स, यूरोप हैज बीन टाइम एंड अगेन not very comfortable with India's human rights record. Because Europe today, Zongpin says that it has started observing human right violations in India at a very micro level. Pointing out those human right violations at a micro level make India uncomfortable because we perceive them as interference. By, for example, when anti-CAA protests were happening in India, Europe made a comment कि भाई India should handle these protests carefully. We found it as an unnecessary interference. Similarly, protest against the farm laws. He says that when protests against the farm laws were being seen in India, Europe made a comment saying that India must engage in a dialogue with farmers. And we found that as an unnecessary interference by Europe, that why they have to comment upon an internal issue of us. देखो, बात भी सही है. हमारे यहाँ का कोई डोमेस्टिक मुद्दा है, उसमें आपको किसी प्रकार की स्टेटमेंट देने की क्या आवश्यकता. अब जर्मनी में अगर आज की डेट में हम बात करें तो सर, जो आपके यहाँ पर सीरिया के रिफ्यूजीज आए थे, आप उनके साथ क्या व्यवहार कर रहे हो, हम कभी टिप्पणी करते हैं? हम तो नहीं करते ना सर. फ्रांस में जो है आज की डेट में वुमेन को बुर्का नहीं पहनने दिया जाता, और फ्रांस में जो एक प्रकार से हिजाब को लेकर मूवमेंट चल रही है, हम कभी उसके बारे में टिप्पणी करते हैं? हम तो नहीं करते ना सर. तो हम ये भी उम्मीद करते हैं कि आप भी मत करो. अगर वो आपका इंटरनल इशू है, आप नहीं चाहोगे कि हम आपके ऊपर टिप्पणी करें, तो फिर आप हमारे इशू को क्यों कर रहे हो? ठीक है ना. तो यहाँ पर एक बैलेंस मेंटेन करना एक मुश्किल पॉइंट है, और यहाँ पर यही ये जोंगपिंग कहता है कि ये प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है राइटिस्ट के पॉलिटिक्स में. क्योंकि राइटिस्ट के केस में क्या होता है ना, अथॉरिटेरियन टेंडेंसी होती है सर. तो अथॉरिटेरियन टेंडेंसी में ये होता है सर कि कोई भी स्टेटमेंट जो है ना, वो बेबुनियाद तरीके से उसको हम कुछ बड़ा चढ़ा कर बोलना शुरू कर देते हैं. अब देखो, पिछले 3-4 दिनों से वो संबित पात्रा लगा हुआ है. अरे पहले बेटा शरीर से उग तो जा पूरा. तू अभी उगा नहीं, तेरे अंग नहीं होंगे जीवन में अभी तक तेरे. और वो पार्लियामेंट में खड़े होके स्टेटमेंट पे स्टेटमेंट दिए जा रहा है. कांग्रेस पार्टी जॉर्ज सोरोस, सोनिया गांधी जॉर्ज सोरोस। अरे भैया, जॉर्ज सोरोस की कंपनी में एस जयशंकर का बेटा तो काम करता है, ध्रुव जयशंकर। पहले उसके बारे में क्लैरिटी दे दो। तो एक दूसरे को फंसाने के चक्कर में क्या होता है ना सर, ये खुद ही फंस जाते हैं। तो इस प्रकार से ये एक्सपोज हो जाते हैं। अच्छा, और कितनी आयरोनिकल बात है, आप ये सोचो कि कहने को एक मेजोरिटी सरकार है हमारी, और सो कॉल्ड बड़ी पावरफुल सरकार है, और ये खड़े होकर आज की डेट में कह रहे हैं कि भाई जॉर्ज सोरोस इंडिया में इंटरफेयर कर रहा है। तो आप जॉर्ज सोरोस को उठा के ले आओ, या सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक करके मार दो उसको यूएस में, अगर आप में हिम्मत है इतनी तो। सर, कंप्लेंट करने से क्या होगा? तो ये एक प्रॉब्लम ह्यूमन राइट वायलेशन को लेके देखने को मिल रही है। तीसरा वो कहते हैं सर, विद रिस्पेक्ट टू व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज प्लूरलिस्टिक सोसाइटी। सर, इंडिया इज अ डाइवर्स सोसाइटी। नाउ प्रॉब्लम टुडे इज कि भाई यूरोपियन सोसाइटीज आर नॉट जनरली डाइवर्स, दे आर वेरी होमोजीनस सोसाइटीज, आइदर दे आर कैथलिक्स और दे आर प्रोटेस्टेंट्स। सो दे हैव व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज मोनोफेथ, सिंगल फेथ है वहां पे। So for them, sir, diversity is not something which is a big challenge. Now, because India is a very diverse society, multi-religious society, multicultural society, problem today is taking along everybody in a diverse society is bound to create some problems because you cannot fulfill everybody's need. Now, issue is that, sir, sometimes when we take policies or make policies for a diverse society like India, there is a probability that some groups' interest might not be fulfilled and they might protest. And if they protest, Europe says that, see, this is not what pluralism is. Pluralism means that if you have a diverse society, you should ensure welfare and interests of everybody. Sir, at least Europe should not be giving us lectures on diversity and pluralism when they are not diverse themselves. The question that India raises often is that how many times have Europe raised these kind of pluralism issues with respect to US, which is also a very diverse society? आपने अमेरिका के खिलाफ तो कभी ये स्टेटमेंट नहीं दी है कि सर वहाँ पे जो है ब्लैक्स के साथ ये हो रहा है, या मुस्लिम्स के साथ ये हो रहा है, या जो मेक्सिकन्स आए हुए हैं या फिलिपिनोज आए हुए हैं उनके साथ ये सब हो रहा है। आप हमारे ऊपर ये स्टेटमेंट ला रहे हो, तो ये एक इशू है सर। और फोर्थ पॉइंट यहाँ पे जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट रेजोल्यूशन का आता है ना सर, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट रेजोल्यूशन में हम ये कहते हैं कि टुडे द प्रॉब्लम दैट हैज हैपेंड इज that these kind of democracy, pluralism, human right related issues that have erupted, Europe and India do not have mechanisms to basically resolve these issues. And lack of mechanisms to resolve these issues means that these end up in becoming irritants between India and Europe. तो आपको फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लम समझ आ रही है सर, यूरोप के साथ क्या है? नजरिए में, सोच में फर्क है सर। अब आते हैं जी अगले क्वेश्चन पे कि सर, इंडिया एंड ईयू शेयर अ नंबर ऑफ पॉलिटिकल गोल, सिक्योरिटी कंसर्न्स एंड प्रायोरिटीज फॉर ग्लोबल गवर्नेंस, explain through scholars that how these act as binders of the relationship. So sir, when it comes to, you know, नहीं ये कहना कि भाई वी स्टिल दे स्टिल सी अस एज अ कॉलोनी तो नहीं कहेंगे, बिकॉज दे हैव इवॉल्व फ्रॉम दैट। तो वो कॉलोनियल हैंगओवर तो उतना नहीं है इतना आज की डेट में, जितना एक पॉइंट पे आज से 25 30 40 साल पहले होता था। पर ये है कि उनके परसेप्शन अलग है। देखो, सबसे बड़ा जो प्रॉब्लम है वो ये है कि यार यूरोप जो है ना वो पुरानी डेमोक्रेसीज है, वहां पे डेमोक्रेसी 500 700 साल पहले आई है। हम नई डेमोक्रेसी हैं, 70 75 साल हुए हैं अभी। अभी भारत विकसित भी नहीं बना है। तो आपको ये चीज समझनी है कि इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में सबसे बड़ी समस्या ये है कि उनको ये लगता है कि भाई हमारे जैसे, हम जैसे बिहेव करते हैं बाकी डेमोक्रेसीज को भी वैसे ही बिहेव करना चाहिए। पर उनको ये चीज समझ नहीं आती कि भाई आपको भी उस पॉइंट पे पहुंचने के लिए 500 700 साल लगे हैं इवॉल्व करके मेच्योर करने में। तो आप वो मेच्योरिटी एक 75 साल के देश में नहीं आप देख सकते। तो फंडामेंटल इशू ये है, उनको ये लगता है कि भाई जिस प्रकार का हमारा सोफिस्टिकेटेड डिसेंट व्यवहार है उसी तरीके से बाकियों का भी व्यवहार होना चाहिए, वो नहीं हो पाएगा। और सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज है डिफरेंस इन डाइवर्सिटी। भाई आप लोग हमेशा से होमोजीनस रहे, तो आपको वो डाइवर्सिटी का चैलेंज आया नहीं, हमें डाइवर्सिटी का चैलेंज पहले दिन से आया। तो ये फंडामेंटल डिफरेंस रहेगा। इवेंचुअली ये प्रॉब्लम तभी सॉल्व होगी जब यूरोप इस चीज़ को एक्सेप्ट करेगा कि भाई इंडिया एक डाइवर्स कंट्री है और उसको डेमोक्रेसी चलाने का हक अपनी तरफ से है। तो वो जैसे चला रहा है वो चलाए। अब आप आते हैं इस पॉइंट पे देखने के लिए कि सर व्हाट आर दी प्रायोरिटीज फॉर ग्लोबल गवर्नेंस वेयर पॉलिटिकल एंड सिक्योरिटी प्रायोरिटीज मिक्स। स्कॉलर हियर इज बाय द नेम ऑफ सेबीन फिशर। सेबीन SABINE, सेबीन फिशर FISCHER. Sabine Fisher is of the opinion that, sir, one area where there is a commonality at the global governance level is UN reforms. Europe today understands very clearly that there is an urgent need to do UN reforms. Because Europe today very clearly feels that UN is not that democratic as an institution as it ought to be. So Europe has a very normative, moralistic overtone for UN. Normative and moralistic. Normative means that it wants to prescribe some norms for improvement of UN. Moralistic because on the moral ground it believes that UN is not that democratic as it ought to be in the future. So this is where India and Europe collaborate with each other. Both believe that there is a need for UN reforms. Because India also has the same belief that UN is not a representative institution. Second point is, sir, Global South. This is an area of great synchronization between India and Europe today. Because Europe today feels that India is any day better as a power to support in global south than China. Because China has the tendency of being exclusive and India's behavior is more inclusive. Europe says that China feels that it alone has the right to develop other states. India feels that while we develop, we must help others to develop. So Europe feels that this inclusive attitude of India, that while we develop, we should help others to develop, is different from the exclusive attitude of China, where it feels that if I have developed, I know what is the best way to develop. So this brings India and Europe closer at the global south level. So in the future, if India intends to explore any cooperation in global south with EU as a partner, EU is a willing partner. Third point Sabine Fisher says is with respect to regional groupings. So Europe is very comfortable today to promote and support India in regional groupings. This is because Europe always believes that multilateralism is one of the points that will enable India to have a bigger say in multilateral platforms. So any type of groupings where today India is present, these regional global groupings is something that Europe is very supportive of. So they never feel insecure that why India is only present here, why we are not present there. Because they believe that by being present in different multiple groupings which are at the regional global level, you shoulder more responsibility. भाई आप किसी भी ग्रुपिंग में जाओगे तो आप जो है अपने कंधे पे रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी तो लोगे ही ना कुछ करने की। ऐसा तो है नहीं कि चाहे समोसा पार्टी के लिए आ गए वहां बैठने के लिए। तो इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में वो पॉजिटिव नजरिए से देखते हैं। अब आते हैं जी इस क्वेश्चन पे, दी इंडिया एंड यू हैव अ लॉन्ग ट्रेडिशन इन यूएन पीस कीपिंग ऑपरेशन एंड पोस्ट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट रिकंस्ट्रक्शन। Explain with reference to scholars. Sir, here you can write down few lines. According to Alfredo, Alfredo, ALFEREDO, Alfredo, since 1960s, EU has supported India in the UN peacekeeping missions because it believes that more India in the peacekeeping operations shall help in the global rise of India. Since the end of the Cold War, India has also positioned itself as a responder, positioned itself as a responder to humanitarian crisis that include tackling of tsunamis, earthquakes, to evacuating citizens in war zones. The recent attempts by India to undertake reconstruction of Afghanistan and provide developmental support in Africa is seen by Europe today as having a space in post conflict resolution where India focuses on developmental reconstruction while ensuring peace and stability. ठीक है जी, यहाँ तक क्लियर हो गया जी सबको। चल, यहाँ से कल कंटिन्यू करेंगे जी आगे, और आगे बढ़ेंगे फिर।